Good morning to you all. Thank you very much, Neville. It will come as no surprise to you that Christians are the most persecuted faith group in the world. Even before we began work on this report, Persecuted and Forgotten, a report on Christians oppressed for their faith 2013 to 2015, the facts of Christian persecution had been made clear to the extent that we see today. If we track back and look at the situation in 2012 and about that time, we'll see that Research Institute had made it clear that 75% or more of acts against religious groups were in fact perpetrated against Christians. And I refer here to for example, the International Society for Human Rights based in Frankfurt in Germany, a very well-respected institute. What we're talking about is the lives of ordinary people seeking to live out their faith. For that, and very often for only that, they suffer the very worst that violence can throw at them. Many are killed, many are abducted, many disappear without trace, others are intimidated in the workplace, do not receive a fair hearing in law courts. So this is the backdrop to the report that we have launched this week. We sought in this report to encounter the people who are the living face of persecution. So who are these people? How do they suffer? What we're going to see now is a short video which outlines the findings of our report.
In some parts of the world, Christians have had no choice but to watch the desecration of symbols of faith they hold dear. Indeed, perpetrators of such crimes have used the latest in new media technology to reveal to the world their intent to carry out sacrilegious acts. Crosses being smashed, icons defaced, statues thrown down and altars reduced to rubble. The faithful themselves have suffered as never before. In June 2014, extremist terror group ISIS, Daesh, seized Mosul, Iraq's second city. Christians had to choose between abandoning their faith or facing the sword. When hundreds of thousands fled into the desert, including many Muslims, bishops lamented that for the first time in more than 1,600 years, there was no mass, no Christian services in Mosul. Almost everyone had gone. In Iraq, as in so many other regions, violence and forced displacement has affected every group, irrespective of creed, ethnicity, or class. And yet, for the Christians, persecution has become particularly serious. The rise of militant Islamic groups such as Daesh has meant the decline of Christians, not just in Iraq, but across the Middle East and Africa. World leaders have increasingly recognized the scale of persecution Christians suffer. In February 2015, 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians were beheaded by Daesh militants in Libya. They had been poor labourers working in the country to send money to their families back home. Their brutal killing was filmed and broadcast to the world, horrifying millions. Pope Tawadros II has since announced that they will be formally recognised as martyrs by the Church. Now, Catholic charity Aid to the Church in Need is releasing a fresh report assessing persecution against Christians in countries of great concern. The report, titled Persecuted and Forgotten, finds that between 2013 and 2015, the situation for many Christians has been catastrophic. The numbers of displaced and refugees have hit an all-time high. The report's findings show that from 2013 to 2015, the number of countries rated as extreme on the scale of persecution jumped from 6 to 10. An exodus of Christians is unfolding. Islamic groups have mounted a program of religiously motivated ethnic cleansing, notably in parts of the Middle East and Africa. The fear of genocide has meant that Christianity is on course to disappear from Iraq, potentially within 5 years, unless emergency help is provided on a massively increased scale. In Syria, up to half the Christian population has fled since the war began in March 2011. The Christian presence is also coming under fire from Islamic extremists in other parts of the world. In Nigeria, 200 girls were abducted in Chibok in April 2014 by terror group Boko Haram in a kidnapping that sparked a worldwide campaign led by people of influence and celebrities. But the Middle East and Africa is not alone in suffering persecution, nor is the problem confined to radical Islam. In Indonesia, a growing Islamist presence has also seen the destruction of churches and the banning of traditional Christian celebrations in some states. In Pakistan, Christians and others are at particular risk from fanatics intent on abusing controversial blasphemy laws. Suspect interpretation of the laws becomes the pretext to legitimise naked aggression. Meantime, pressure grows for the release of Christian Asia Bibi, a mother of 5 who had been put on death row for blasphemy. Christians have also come under pressure from radical branches of Hinduism in India and extremist Judaism in Israel. Totalitarian regimes, including China and North Korea, have put increasing pressures on Christianity, which is perceived as a threat due to its connection with the West. Though the situation worsened for Christians during the time reviewed, small victories were won. In Sudan, Christian woman Maryam Ibrahim was released from jail and cleared of apostasy. A petition for her release was signed by more than 1 million people worldwide in an amazing display of Christian solidarity. The situation of persecution for Christians went from bad to worse during the period under review. Mistreated and abused, vulnerable and often ignored, in some parts of the world, Christians face the outright threat of genocide. Aid to the Church Needs Persecuted and Forgotten report shines a light on an increasingly disturbing issue of our age. Urgent reading for those of great faith or no faith, it makes clear the situation for Christians with shocking witness testimony combined with an appeal for action. Only together can we help Christians in need overcome persecution. As the founder of Aid to the Church Need, Father Verenvied von Straten said, "They are being tested in faith, we are being tested in love. Let us ensure that persecuted Christians are not forgotten."
She and Dr. John Newton, my colleagues in this report, have worked extraordinarily hard against considerable pressures to produce this report on time. This product would not be here if it weren't for their efforts. The report takes many different forms in actual fact. What you see in the seats that you have are these executive summaries, the A4 booklet that summarizes the findings. And among the things that are of interest is a map that shows where the persecution is to be found and a table that seeks to demonstrate the change that we've seen over the past 2 years when we last did a report on this nature. But what you might like to do, in fact we do encourage you to do, is to go look at our website, www.acnuk.org/persecution, and there you will find the full findings, which makes up a considerable dossier of interviews, research of different forms, there for you to see the full extent of what we've done to compile this report. Also available today is a smaller booklet, strangely enough with the same title, Persecuted and Forgotten. But what's interesting there, as well as looking at the 10 worst offending countries of persecution, 10 of the worst offending countries, there's also a number of profiles of individuals who've suffered grievously as a result of persecution. And I'd like to draw out just one or two of those as I draw to a close. One of them is, if we move on the slides a little, we'll see two elderly women, Victoria and Gazella. I met these two 80-year-old women in Erbil, northern Iraq. And their passage to Iraq from their home in Karamlesh in the Nineveh Plains was one that really makes your heart bleed. When ISIS captured that particular town of Karamlesh in the summer of last year, everyone fled except for a handful of people who, for a variety of reasons, were too frail and unable to leave. Among those were these two elderly women. And eventually, of course, ISIS caught up with them. And they were frog-marched to the edge of the town, and there they were told to convert. And underlying that threat was the potential of them being killed. And what happened next that really deserves special mention? One of them, Gazella, was asked, as I say, to abandon her faith, but she responded like this: "If you want to kill us for our faith, we are prepared to die here and now." She was told that if she converted, she would go to heaven, but she responded, "We believe that if we show love and mercy, kindness and forgiveness, we can bring about, through God's grace, the kingdom of God on earth as well as in heaven." Well, it seems that somehow that heroism had some impact on those who were holding her and Victoria. And somehow they were able to make their way to Erbil and indeed to safety. But all the while, there are far more stories than that show of a very different outcome. An outcome marked by violence, very often, certainly death. If we look in so many parts of the world, the Christian life is darkened by oppression. The report doesn't seek to show that militant Islam is the only problem, and it's important to make clear that this report identifies a number of other threats to Christianity. Some of them are graphically demonstrated here. India, where Hindu militancy is putting extraordinary pressure on the church. And then there is China, where again the report demonstrates the increasing pressures of state oppression. And there's China, which falls into a similar category there. You can find out more about it as you read and as you go online to see what there is to be seen there. We were mindful of the words of Father Werenfried. When we look at these reports, when we read about them, when we convey them to you, we simply do not just tell the story, we speak to the situation heart to heart. We are reminded of Father Werenfried's words as he says, "Our charity is writing the martyrology of this age, not in some scholar's study, but as a living eyewitness, and hence with the greatest sympathy and the deepest emotion." We sometimes might wonder, given how things develop, whether our help makes any meaningful difference. But 2 days ago, we were fortunate enough, Neville and I, to hear from a man whose story shows the extent to which our help as a community can manifestly change the lives of individuals. I'm thinking here of my interview over the phone with Father Jacques Morad. Some of you may know of Father Jacques. He was priest in Syria, and I met him 10 years ago when I went there to his town of Karatain. And it was from there that he was kidnapped on the 21st of May. He was held in an ISIS prison in Raqqa, the north of Syria, for 84 days, he told me. And every day, an ISIS commander would go to his cell and order him to abandon his Christian faith. And every day, Father Jacques Morad refused. And every day, he thought that day would be his last, that he would be killed for his refusal. So you might ask, why was he never killed? He was able at last, released or escaped as he was, to tell us why he was never killed. How indeed he found his escape. He explained over the phone that there was a friend who was somehow linked to ISIS, whose family had been supported by Father Jacques Morad's humanitarian support for those in greatest need. This particular help was funded by Aid to the Church in Need. We found out some of the projects that we're not normally able to disclose. These projects included a shelter, a large shelter which was bomb-proof, where thousands of people had gathered as that particular town or city came under bombardment. We found out about a reservoir that the charity had secretly been able to support Father Jacques in creating when water supply had been cut off, just as it had in Aleppo, as Archbishop Jean-Bar explained in his homily. So that help had supported the family of this ISIS commander, or ISIS contact rather, and he was then able to find a way to dress Father Jacques Morad as an Islamist fighter in disguise, put him on a motorbike, and he made his escape. That was his story. And it's a story of how our help, your help, can make a huge difference. We're mindful that that help is a light in the darkness. We're aware that this report is not simply a dossier of information. It's a light that shines, telling the truth about what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Christ. And as we said in the House of Lords on Tuesday, it presses a question, forces a question to be asked of our leaders in government and elsewhere. How many more people are going to suffer? How many more people are going to be killed for their faith? How many more people are going to be abducted? How many more people are going to be forced from their homes before this government and others like it make religious freedom the priority that it should be? That is the underlying statement that we make as we place this report before you. We encourage you to read it, and do please get in contact with us to share your comments, your thoughts as you read that report. Thank you, Neville. Thank you to you all.